Okay, I found a cool correlation here between the map of the churches in Revelation and the Pleiades, what the constellation looks like, okay? So let's go and see that first. These are the 7 churches of Asia. We'll start with the left here, not necessarily in numerical order. Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodiceans, Ephesus, and Smyrna. Now remember that the Church of Philadelphia is the only one that's going in the rapture. They have the crowns that can be taken away. You must be clothed in white garments of righteousness, Isaiah 61:10. And if you are not, then you are not going in this one because it is a reward, okay? Check out the must-watch videos for more information on that. And I want to show you some interesting things that I've found with this, okay? So remember that all of these churches, except for the one Church of Philadelphia, they're going to basically dissolve into Smyrna, okay? The Church of Smyrna is actually going through the tribulation, okay? So let me show you that here in the book of Revelation. And this would be in the, let's see, 2nd chapter. Yep, okay. All right, so we've got, write this letter to the angel of the Church of Smyrna, and this is the one that's going to suffer, okay? And there's going to be some blasphemy from the people who are opposing them, which will be the Antichrist, okay? They say they are Jews, but they are not. Now, that's a similarity between the Church of Philadelphia and this church. They're both talked about in that type of language, okay? The synagogue belongs to Satan. Don't be afraid about what you are about to suffer. The devil will throw some of you into prison to test you. You will suffer for 10 days. Now, this 10 days of suffering is really called a time of testing. It's not just 10 literal days, okay? It's basically from Yom Teruah, or the Day of Trumpets, to the Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur, is 10 days of testing. So the Day of the Lord, part 1, is the rapture. Then you have the 7-year tribulation, and then the Day of the Lord, part 2, is when he comes back with all of us who have gotten up there. Some of us in the elder population from Revelation chapter 4 with the crowns from the Church of Philadelphia. And then later on in seal 6, it will be everybody else that wasn't ready or the new believers, okay? So that's kind of the order of things. And then, of course, he's when he comes back that second time with the rest of us, he's going to, get rid of the false prophet and the beast and all of those, evil things. And Satan will be bound for his 1,000 years, okay? And that will start the millennial reign of Jesus, okay? Now, it does say that these people will get a crown of life, but they are going to have to go through this and suffer, okay? Because they didn't make it in this first rapture, if that makes sense, okay? All right, now let's look at this. So you see that these two images look very similar, okay? Now let's look at this over here. The star clusters of the Pleiades, I think it's spelled wrong on that part there, but it's got an A in it up there. You see that? Or the 7 sisters is what it's known as in this mythology. Has 6 visible stars and 1 that is not shown, okay? So it is actually known as a 7-star cluster, okay? Now, all of these, interestingly enough, are names of daughters in mythology, and they're the daughters of Atlas, okay? So if you know anything about the 3-eye Atlas, that thing that's going up in space right now, they're named after the telescope that identified it, okay? And then they put a few little letters in front of it or something. So there's 2 things up there right now. I'm going to call them planetary bodies or celestial bodies that have Atlas in the name. One of them is a comet, and then one of them is this weird thing called 3-eye Atlas, okay? But isn't that interesting that that's all kind of tying into this 7 churches, end time stuff? These constellations are looking like the map of where these churches in Asia are, and There's just a lot of like little coincidences, which in Israel they'll tell you, coincidence is not a kosher word, okay? So we're just sort of poking around in that a little bit with, what these things are and what that could mean. Now, in the beginning of Revelation, he talks about having these 7 stars in his hands, okay? And so if it is related to this Pleiades thing, which is also talked about in the book of Job, and I want to say it's Amos, but I'll put the scriptures down in the description box if you want to look at that, because there are quite a few of them that talk about stars or wandering stars, or they mention these constellations by name. And so I want you to see that, and we're going to kind of see what these things could mean and what it's really talking about. Now, I'll tell you this too. In the Revelation 12 sign, some of you think that the sign is complete and that it was already done, in 2017. But that was just the first part of it. That was the sign of the woman. So, you had in the constellation Virgo, you had Jupiter was in the kind of womb area of the constellation for 9 months in retrograde, meaning like it's going around in a circle sort of and staying inside. And then you also have the crown of 12 stars, where you had Leo, which had 9 stars, and then you had the extra 3 planets that came and were part of that constellation for a short period of time, okay? Then you had the sun that was at her shoulder, and then the moon at her feet, okay? And that's what made that sign, okay? And I'll put maybe some links to a good video in the description box if you're not familiar with that part of the sign. But the second part of the sign is the sign of the dragon, which we have not seen yet, because the dragon is supposed to sweep some stars from the sky. Now, I think this is literal, but I think it's angels, okay? Now, there could be some like star shower, meteor, kind of like a meteor shower kind of thing going on at the same time, because it is supposed to be a sign in the heavens. So we're probably going to see something physical. But I think primarily it's that there's going to be some angels that are coming down from this second heaven, which is what space is called. First heaven is like where the birds are in the clouds, and the second heaven is space, but there's also a supernatural element to that, besides just like stars and planets and that kind of thing. And then the third heaven is where God lives, okay? So in this second heaven, I think that my theory is proving true based on my dreams and what I'm seeing here, is that there are some angels that are in some kind of prison up there, and they're bound, and they may be holding up the constellations. In some of these constellations, they may be holding them up as part of their prison. Now, you've got some of the angels that are in the pit. I think some are under the river Euphrates and things like that. But I think you've got some of them also kind of being held in the sky, okay? Because in my dream, and this was from about 8 years ago, it is on YouTube under a different channel name, but I have it on this channel under what will happen during the rapture. And so it's a dream and an interpretation. I got the dream a long time ago, but I got the interpretation, and then I had a secondary dream too where I met Jesus in space in a rapture, okay? So what happens, I'm sure from my dreams, is that when I saw Jesus in space, he didn't have any stars behind him. It was just blackness of space. But I knew I was in space. There were no stars behind him. So I think what happens is that the stars fall out of the sky at some point during this Revelation sign of the dragon, okay? And then in my dream, this is the secondary dream, the darkness dream, I see these beings that they come down and they look like they have light in them, but they're like the light is dying out of the creatures, okay? And they kind of have the shape of a human in sort of a way, but they don't really have like facial features. They don't really have digits for fingers, but they kind of have like arms and legs and that kind of thing. But it almost looks like they don't have bones in their bodies, because their bodies like are kind of wispy and they can move in weird ways that like your body wouldn't be able to move that way because of your bones, but it's just like they have muscles and some kind of tissue on them. But the light inside of them is dying out to the point where it's like sick kind of yucky color that it's turning instead of this kind of bright color that's like illuminated, almost like they're just turning into like death color, okay? And then out of their bodies, this darkness starts to spray out of them, and it just makes everything around you completely dark, like you can't see through it. So you couldn't see the moon, you couldn't see, if probably if the sun was out. This was like kind of like a twilight time that I was seeing it. And then everything around you just turns completely dark, and you have to get inside of something. So we got inside of this bus, which in my dream is a representation of the rapture. Now, there were lots of other Christians in this dream that did not get on this bus with us. There was probably like 300 to 400 people at this place we were at, and only about 20 to 30 of us got on this bus, and that was it. So I think that ties into what we've been talking about on this channel as well, that there's a lot of Christians that are going to be left behind because they don't know how you actually get to the rapture, okay? But given both of those two dreams where Jesus didn't have any stars behind him, and then I'm seeing these light beings are falling to the ground, falling down to the earth, and they're sort of like flying kind of horizontally, kind of all intertwined together, and this light is dying out of them and darkness is spraying out of them. So it's like they've come from light, but now they're being switched into darkness. You see what I'm saying? So it almost would seem to me that the stars are these fallen angels that have been like holding up the constellations or giving, stars into the night, and that's been their like punishment place, and now they're getting kicked out of heaven, okay? Because if you look at some of that other around that Revelation chapter 12, you'll see that that's going to happen not once but twice. The first time Satan's going to take his tail and kind of pull them down here to, I guess, do some mischief during this day of darkness, which is biblical. That is in the book of Joel, and I do have an end time Joel Bible study on here in 2 separate videos. Part 1 is chapter 1, part 2 is chapter 2, and you will see some very interesting things about what's going to happen during the rapture during that thing as well. And then the other prophetess lady over there, Halingwe McHunna, she also saw some things about the darkness and the rapture too, and I have some clips of that on this channel as well from the Twin Show, okay? So check those out. That will help you to see kind of what we're expecting here. But I do think there is some kind of correlation here with these stars in this Pleiades, which you'll find in the book of Joel, and I believe it's Amos as well that talks about this. And then there's a few other verses too that I'll put in the description boxes that talk about the stars, okay? And definitely with this map of these churches in Revelation. So that just gives you a little bit sort of to chew on, and go back and look at those other videos if you want to know about this stuff with the stars and then the darkness that will come, because there's definitely something that's connected here with my dreams and what we're seeing with these planetary bodies and things like that. Okay? All right. I love you guys.